Hello everyone and welcome to What Does Brexit Mean for My EU Funding with Simon Pascoe. This webinar is brought to you by the Institution of Environmental Sciences and will be presented by Simon Pascoe from ENEP, the European Network of Environmental Professionals. Simon has over 20 years experience working with local authorities, universities and NGOs on EU funding opportunities. Today, in this free IES webinar, he will explain the latest developments in funding post-Brexit and how to best proceed when seeking both long and short-term funding during this uncertain period. Thank you for your attention. Please stand by. This webinar will be starting shortly.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon here in Brussels, I should say. My name is Simon Pascoe. I'm the representative in Brussels for the European Network of Environmental Professionals. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak to you all today and to share some of the developments which are going on here in Brussels as well as those back home in the UK. I'm going to be talking primarily about Brexit's impact for EU environment funding. I'll be talking about a number of the issues. I apologise to those of you that have a good level of knowledge of some of these issues, but I'm going to start with an overview of how it's affecting some of the different funds. First of all, though, I want to talk a little bit about presentation structure. We'll talk a little bit about what ENEP is, so you know a little bit more about the network of European environmental professionals. We'll talk a little bit more about what we know about Brexit. Of course, there's been a number of big developments this week with David Davis MP visiting Strasbourg, discussions going on in the European Union. We're talking a little bit about some of the funds that are most affected by Brexit. We'll talk about the direct funding, the programs like Horizon 2020 and the SME initiative and others. Versus the shared management funds, which are also very significant in our regions around the UK. There are different implications for different funds depending on which particular funding stream we're looking at. So with your agreement, we'll have a look through some of the different funding streams and understand those funding streams and where the information flows from them on these particular issues and how they're affected by Brexit. If I go on to just going to switch the camera off a minute if I can. Moving on to a little bit about ENEP. ENEP is a network of environmental professionals, national bodies like Institution for Environmental Sciences. We've been operational since 2002, 21 member associations, 35,000 individual environmental professionals. And of course, we have 2 general assemblies a year meeting in Brussels and around Europe, but also executive committees which pilot and drive the work, the shared work programme of the Federation. There's more information about our organisation on our website, which you see there at the bottom of the screen. And of course, we cover a range of interests, from those professionals, those national bodies interested in waste, biodiversity, green infrastructure, environmental auditing and standards, right through to air policy, environmental sciences, chemicals and industrial emissions. So there's a wide range of interests which participate in the ENEP network. As I say, our website's a good source of information, certainly one which you can take a look at and find out more information. All members of IES have access to the website. If you have any difficulties, contact us and we will find a way to make sure you've got access to the various resources. We have a very good members area which includes the monthly news flashes of events and developments taking place in the EU. There's a useful calendar there of events and things which are going on both in Brussels and elsewhere. And of course there's a bulletin which we publish periodically to cover some of the activities of our other member associations within the European network. So let's turn to the question of today, which is about the funding, future of environmental funding. And of course, one thing we need to start with really is the basics with how the multi-annual financial framework for the period 2014-2020 actually works. It is not a budget, it's actually a perspective which, if you like, sets the priorities across 5 themes under which all of those EU funds that we know flow from. The perspective for 2014-2020 is worth a total of 960 billion euros. And of course it breaks down into these 5 main spending areas, which are reflected within the annual budgets of the EU that are brought forward in the autumn of every year by the European Commission. Very substantial amount of money, of course, going into smart and inclusive growth, sustainable growth, natural resources, including the Common Agricultural Policy there, 39% and so on, down through the different headings, the different funds. So let's look at the direct funding versus the decentralized funds or shared management funds. European Commission directly manages with its agencies programs like Erasmus+, Horizon 2020, Competitiveness and SME programs, the COSME program, the Connecting Europe Facility, Life Plus, Health for Growth program, Creative Europe, and European Globalization Fund. These funds, as I say, are organized and run directly by the European Commission, the Director Generals, or even the agencies which support those different departments. Shared management funds are things like the structural investment funds, investing in the lesser developed regions, regions needing to create growth and employment. And of course, those programs are run in partnership with the member states. And of course, they're run through a series of key funds. The Infrastructure Fund, of course, the European Regional Development Fund, European Social Fund, Agricultural Rural Development Fund, and the European Maritime and Fisheries funds. Of course, complementing those funds, we also have the targeting of cross-border areas, transnational partnership areas, and inter-regional cooperation areas. And I'll talk a little bit about those later, particularly in relation to Brexit. So of course, why differentiate between the two now? Well, the issues may well vary as to how Brexit impacts upon them. Of course, when you're competing for directly managed funds, you're in Europe-wide competition. The success rates for Horizon 2020, as many of you will know, can vary from 8 to 16%. And of course, you will need to be part of a good consortia if you want to secure funds. So of course, that highly competitive element will be creating issues with regards to Brexit. Continental partners will be looking closely at the risk associated with preparing projects. So there will be considerations there, and of course I'll come back to those later as we run through the presentation. It's important to know your agencies. It's important, of course, to be involved in any brokerage events, and I've got an advert for a brokerage event which I'll update you on at the end of the presentation, which would be a very positive way, a useful way to get involved in the climate and environment programs which are launching calls in the new year. Of course, when we look at shared management funds, of course, the member state plays a much bigger role in coordinating those programs. Things like the structural investment programs have a major role for the local enterprise partnerships within, particularly within England, but also, of course, what goes on within the devolved regions of the UK as well. Operational programs are the key programs which sit as overarching documents setting priorities for funds that respond to the thematic priorities of the Cohesion Policy 2014-2020. And of course, the whole call and of course evaluation process is run by the member states in partnership with the European Commission. The European Commission's role is really to monitor spend, to ensure that spending achieves targets, and of course responds to the key priorities that have been signed up to by the UK government in the so-called partnership agreement. So that's really where the decision making takes place, and of course I'll go into more detail on those in a moment. So what's the latest state of play in Brussels regarding Brexit? Well, of course, the ball is very much in the UK government's camp. We have the issues going on within the UK with regards to the Supreme Court case, but we're also waiting, of course, in Europe for the presentation of the Article 50 letter, which is suggested that it will be coming forward around March 2017. But in the meantime, there's been a number of developments on the funding front. There's been a couple of letters now which have been issued in the run-up to the autumn statement by David Gork, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, guaranteeing EU structural investment funds, and of course with additional commitments being made to farmers under the Common Agricultural Policy until 2020. Evidence gathering, of course, has been also an important part of the process, and Joe Johnson, Member of Parliament, Science Minister, has been gathering information around the developments with Horizon 2020 and anecdotal evidence of discrimination against UK partners. Universities are also increasing pressure on Carlos Moedas here in Brussels, Commissioner for Research, Science and Innovation, faced several questions at the Interreg committee, the Research Industry Committee of the European Parliament recently, where MEPs were trying to encourage, particularly British MEPs, trying to encourage Carlos Moedas to move beyond bland Brexit reassurance statements, to go into more detail to say that British partners still should play a full part until the final outcome of Brexit is known. For those of you that are interested in the scenario building around environment policy, there is a really useful document which the Commission recommends, but also we use very actively in ENEP, and it's the IEP study which was done on the potential policy implications for environment of the UK departure from the European Union. Whilst it was written in March 2016, the various scenarios are all very live and very relevant, and I would recommend looking at them because the policy as well as the funding implications to the UK and environmental interests are very well detailed in this document. And there's a web link there for you to get further information. So if we look at structural investment funds very quickly, we've got we've got an interesting some interesting developments. Of course, for those who don't know the structural funds in detail, the structural funds aim to help growth and employment creation in the regions which are most in need. It categorizes those regions on the basis of gross domestic product, and of course it helps a series of categories of regions. So we've got the poorest regions, we've got the more developed regions, and we've got so-called transitional regions, which are there being assisted by a total package of around 322 billion euros over the period. When we look at how much is available and where, we see that 2/3 of the budget is going into the less developed regions, the red regions. So in the UK, we see Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly and West Wales and the Valleys as two key recipients of cohesion funding or structural investment funds over the period. But as you can see, the lion's share of investment now is going into Central and Eastern Europe, and with a more limited investment in Southern Europe. Of course, structural investment funds cover a wide variety of projects. The themes they cover include training, energy efficiency, research and innovation, renewable energy, cooperation between regions, and support for SME growth and development. So there's a wide range of topics which can be addressed by the regions using these funds. Of course, the principle under which the structural investment funds were set up in 2013 was that we concentrate most of the aid on the poorest regions to increase their level of development, and of course the richer regions see fewer investments coming in than the poorest ones. So here you see 68%, over 68% of the budget going into the poorest regions, and of course you look across, you see the population covered by those funds is most significant. So you see 119 million population being covered by 68% of the funds. You see a population of 307 million there being covered by about 15% of the funds. So there's a concentration on the poorest regions across the EU. So how are the structural investment funds being implemented? And this is important in the context of Brexit, because of course the national and regional programs, of which there are 455 across the European Union, are implemented in partnership with the member states. And of course the UK government, particularly DCLG, plays a very important role in implementing these programs within the UK. Of course, these calls are ongoing, and of course the guarantees given by the Treasury recently are very significant to the continuation of these programs, which are at their midway point at this point in time. So how are projects selected for financing from the structural funds? Well, certainly program monitoring committees sit in London and will look at the programs, and they will look at the different areas around England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and they will be issuing calls, and from those calls projects will be selected. Of course, the operational programs are all available. The priorities established for funding within those programs are all very transparent. So you can see exactly how much infrastructure potential measures are available under ERDF, and you can see how the European Social Fund is working from the training and employment development perspective there as well. So what are the Brexit implications? Well, certainly the latest letter, certainly this is the version that I've been looking at from the 12th of August, but there is also a version from October where David Gauke, the Chief Treasury Advisor, has written to David Davis, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, to set forward some clarity with regarding guarantees to beneficiaries and applicants for the structural investment funds. And the letter is available online, and of course there is a web link, hyperlink connected with this letter, which you can download after the presentation is over. Moving on then, the other funds which are important, of course, are the territorial cooperation funds. These are worth a total in the European Union about 8.9 billion euros. It's a small proportion of the overall structural investment funds, but nevertheless very significant, presents significant opportunities at the current time for collaboration, particularly around the environment, circular economy and resource efficiency opportunities. Looking at the different programs that affect us directly, I've chosen three, going for the cross-border program between England and France. If we go to the website of the Interreg Channel program, which is actually run by Norfolk County Council at the moment, we see some announcements there about the cross-border programs. So here we have Norfolk County Council running as the Secretariat for this program, confirming that nothing materially has changed at this stage. The UK remains a full member of the EU, and of course no changes to the status in the Interreg 5A France Channel program. Of course, they're strongly recommending applicants to make applications to join partnerships, and of course there's an obligation in this program to have UK partners from the eligible area present in these projects. I'll draw to your attention that there is a fifth call coming out on the 2nd of March, an important opportunity to find out now a little bit more about this program, and particularly find out about the environment and resource efficiency priority that this program supports, and types of projects that have already been approved under the previous calls. Likewise, the 2Cs program for Interreg cross-border also has some assurances on its website for UK applicants. It's requoting the announcements of the Treasury following the August announcements, and of course confirms that UK participants, UK partners remain statutory partners within projects. So most 2Cs projects need to involve partners from the 4 member states. That's Belgium, Netherlands, UK and France. And of course this eligible area still expects partners to be present from the UK in this project until we know more news about Brexit and its implication in the longer run. Moving on to the transnational programs, I'm looking at the North Sea program here, which is a cooperation area which runs from, of course, the north of Scotland right down to Kent, and of course then extends from Belgium, Flanders, all the way around to right up to Norway in terms of cooperation projects. And there's an important priority within this program to look at eco-innovation and an opportunity to submit projects. Again, reassurances on the North Sea Programme website about Brexit and its implications are there. And of course, very good advice in times of uncertainty. Sticking to the facts is always a very good strategy. And of course, it's true the UK referendum will obviously eventually have an impact on our programme, but at this stage it's impossible to say precisely what that impact will be. So for the time being, it's business as usual. UK partners are welcome to apply. And the next call for expressions of interest in what is a 2-phase application process is open from now until the middle of July next year, and then during late 2017 and early 2018 full applications can be submitted for projects. As I said, the eco-innovation priority is an important priority under this programme, and I recommend taking a look at the North Sea Programme website. Moving on to interregional cooperation, which is obviously thematic cooperation anywhere in Europe. The Interreg Europe programme is also has a statement on Brexit. The UK is an active and appreciated partner in many interregional cooperation projects. While the next steps are uncertain, current Interreg Europe project partners from the UK should continue their activities. So again, on the Interreg front, reassurance that it's business as usual. There isn't necessarily significant discrimination potential against UK partners, and it's a good source of funding if you can understand the priorities and you can look at the priorities within each of those different programs. Now, moving on, I'm going to move across the Common Agricultural Policy fairly quickly, but of course, again, that is subject in the David Gork letter. There is references, of course, to the guarantees to the farming community, particularly for Pillar 1 payments. And of course, Common Agricultural Policy splits into Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. You see the overall budget for CAP for the 2014-2020 period. And of course, it is also raising questions about the future funds. Direct payments to farmers, of course, the single farm payments delivered through the payment agencies within the UK continue and will continue to be guaranteed until 2020, according to recent confirmations. If we move on to the rural development, Pillar 2, rural development programs obviously work in close coordination with the other funds we've mentioned. And of course, those funds are important in rural areas for diversification, rural diversification, restoring, preserving, enhancing ecosystems, etc., etc. So these programs remain guaranteed until 2020. A document, interesting document, which I downloaded, which I recommend having a look at, was actually done by the Yorkshire Agricultural Society about the implications of Brexit for agriculture in the UK. Very interesting publication, similar to the IEP one I showed you earlier. Gives you good information about the implication of Brexit for Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 in the UK in the longer run. Again, there's a URL there, you can download it, take a look. It's got some useful tables, some useful detail about the implication for both Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Very briefly, European Maritime Fisheries Fund, of course, where the MMO, the Marine Management Organisation, plays an important role in its coordination within the UK, provides opportunities for fisheries diversification, fisheries market measures, but also investing in diversification, green agriculture, territorial development, and maritime integrated maritime policy. Again, more information is available on calls from the Marine Management Organisation, and of course any implications from Brexit on the EMFF fund should be accessible there within that within the MMO website as the key the coordinator of these funds. Now, I want to move on to the centralised funds, the centrally managed funds. Again, the David Gork letter we mentioned actually made reference to the implications for Horizon 2020. And of course, there is an important implications for UK partners wanting to be involved in the different aspects, the different three aspects of the Horizon 2020 programme. I'm not going to go into detail into each of the programmes, excellence in science, industrial leadership, societal challenges, because I suspect many of you have got lots of experience in this area anyway. But I'm going to cover some of the do's and don'ts at the moment with regards to Brexit. As you've seen, UK press has covered stories of anecdotal evidence of discrimination against UK organisations, and of course the Minister Joe Johnson has opened a hotline to the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills to gather evidence on any discrimination that might be taking place in the next few months. Do use this service and do use the government's services on this, because it's worthwhile making them aware of instances where you have found yourselves being discriminated against. But certainly let's be a bit more positive. Let's see some of the ways which we can possibly deal with this issue. What I have learned is that the external evaluators are under very strict instructions in the European Commission, attached to the European Commission, in terms of their evaluation. They should not in any way let Brexit influence their scoring through the evaluations. And most projects go through a 3 evaluation process initially by external evaluators, and the instructions from DG RTD and EASME are very, very clear on this at the moment. But of course you'll say to me the problem is not in the evaluation stage, it's actually at the consortium building stage. So this is going to be a challenge. But my advice to you is engage and do be involved in brokerage events. There are a lot of very interesting calls coming up under climate change, circular economy and resource efficiency in 2017. And of course, you'll only understand how it works by being engaged. Anecdotally, we're hearing that it's not impacting so much on the Oxfords, the Cambridges or the Imperials, but we are seeing that SMEs, smaller organisations, are feeling the effects more readily at the moment. Discrimination that we're hearing anecdotally is coming from beneficiaries and lead consortium partners in a certain member states, but again it's anecdotal. And of course the participation and knowledge is a key issue. Where participation and knowledge is a key issue, you could de-risk those consortia and help those partners by pushing to become members of advisory panels. It's not always about the money, it's actually about the knowledge and the participation. And of course the opportunity is there for you to join the advisory panels, because that could in certain eyes allow you to be a party to the project, party to the information, the project work that's ongoing, and be reimbursed as an advisory panel member for travel and subsistence as part of that consortium. Now, that might not work for everybody, of course, but certainly it's an option, and it's certainly a way which you could discuss it and tackle these issues head on at brokerage events when you meet continental consortia leaders. What we are seeing is that there are probably fewer and fewer lead partners and work package leads coming from the UK, and certainly while this remains a little bit anecdotal, it's certainly something that we need to be aware of. But again, by engaging in brokerage events, you will see and you'll understand how that may affect you. We were also hearing anecdotal evidence of Brexit being used against UK partners on the basis of competitive advantage. A competitive advantage where UK organisations are readily competing with competitors on the continent, and of course Brexit could well be used as the opportunity to exclude the UK partner from that particular scheme. But again, I would add this is anecdotal, and certainly any examples of this need to be passed on to the UK government and the contact line that Minister Joe Johnson has set up. We've got a lot of information on our website which you can benefit from as members. You can access the climate action, environment, resource efficiency and raw materials calls. They're all on our website, and of course the materials from the information day that took place on the 14th of September are also there. Things about how to write a good application and so on and so forth. But of course it's not just about downloading information and reviewing the content of calls and the work programs. It's also about engaging. And of course in January, ERIN, the European Regions for Research and Innovation, in partnership with the Assembly of European Regions, will organise a brokerage event. It will take place on the 19th of January. It's being published on their website today, so we've included the web link here for you to go to their calendar on the ERIN website, and you can register immediately after this event for participating in the brokerage event on the 19th of January. It's free, you just need to attend and turn up, and of course I recommend that you follow the instructions very closely which are published on the ERIN website about preparing for the brokerage event. So how you advertise yourself, how you put forward your interest in the different programs and so on and so forth. You will also be able to see other expressions of interest which you can respond to already before you get to this brokerage event. So the registration opens this afternoon. ERIM is delighted to welcome ENEP members to be associated with this event, and we'll be pleased to support you and helping you to attend this event. It's a very effective way of involving yourself in some shape or form into consortia under these new climate and environment calls which are coming out, which are out for the new year. Finally, the other funds, very briefly. Erasmus, of course, Erasmus Plus has replaced all the previous funds, significant funding opportunity. Of course, it's predominantly coordinated through national contact points. And of course, the national contact point in Birmingham for the UK is run in partnership between the British Council and ECORIS. And if you go to their website, there is information there about Brexit, about preparing for calls in 2017. And of course, the advice that's been provided by the Erasmus contact point is that it's business as usual. So if you're involved in a key sector alliance, which may touch on the environment and climate area, qualifications in that area, then there is, you should go to the national contact point to get advice and keep in touch as the 2017 calls are now online. Life Plus, the same again. Two main programs, of course, the Environment and Climate Action Programme, continuing in 2017. And of course, UK partners remain eligible for the Life Plus funds and can participate as usual. And of course, a few words of advice from, just to wrap up really, on how to Brexit-proof your bidding, your applications in 2017. Be present and active in brokerage events for the centrally managed funds is an effective way of getting involved. Study the 2017 calls carefully. Making reference to all the key work programs, of course, is important to understand exactly what the Commission is looking to invest in. I think an important point as well is to keep in contact with those national contact points, and of course with Interreg, the facilitators. All of the Interreg programs have facilitators which will actively guide you on how to prepare applications for the new programs. Of course, finding and understanding consortia leads and being aware of how that will affect those consortia leads, and of course being able to respond in the way I suggested earlier, possibly by either looking at the funding option or maybe even the slightly lower, more informal option of being an advisory board member of a project to retain an interest in the project, but maybe not in the same way as you might have wanted, maybe a way which might be acceptable to the other partners. And of course being aware that Brexit may have a different impact from the shared management funds to those centrally managed ones that are run by the European Commission DGs or their agencies. I, as our colleagues of the IES, available to provide further information and advice, and of course can put you in contact with a wide range of other stakeholders, other organisations which may be able to assist you